As humans, we would always celebrate what's harder to achieve. Sometimes we stray away from this, but typically we come back to this. So think about evolution and natural selection, and think about things like athletes and the fact that someone can run for 9.58 seconds. Usain Bolt is being celebrated for doing something that is very typically hard to achieve. So if we bring that back to being skinny, you may be able to understand better why being skinny is such a classic, which is what I'll be discussing in today's video. Welcome back to my skinny series. My name is Bola, and today I'll be discussing why being skinny or having skinny privilege would always be a classic. In the old days, we know that famine was much a thing, and we had to hunt our food, and it was really hard. Food was definitely hard to get, and having food and being able to store lots of food was celebrated. And time again in different cultures, we can see how, especially in places where they struggled with food shortages, being able to have stored loads of food and gaining a certain weight typically signify the fact that you're wealthy, you're able to sort of get food and all of that, which was well appreciated in society. However, these days, food is everywhere, and I say that knowing that different parts of the world, depending on what's going on, have different food situations. However, on a general scale, getting food is not something that is a thing of pride anymore, because think about the Western world, especially. There's fast food everywhere you turn. So everywhere you turn, there's something you can munch on. There's food everywhere, especially in the Western world. And when this became a thing compared to, in the old days when Homo sapiens had to hunt for their food, it brought our attention to the fact that we don't need to live in that level of survival mode anymore. Wherever we see food, we need to eat loads and just store that, because we don't know the next time we're going to find food. Now we know there's food everywhere, and so there's been a natural shift from eating loads and storing that energy to having discipline in a place of abundance. So now, especially in the Western world, there's fast foods everywhere you turn, and so the real status symbol is not having to eat junk food. The real status symbol is having a proper meal plan. The real status symbol is having a chef that cooks you healthy meals and actually checks what nutrients you need, and also incorporating that into your meals. The flex is also having maybe a stay-at-home wife, or being a woman that can afford not to work and just looks after her family, or vice versa, whatever works for each family. Or just being in a place where you work but you're also comfortable enough to plan your food and also have the right amount of nutrients in your food. So you may argue that being skinny is not a function of food, but if you look back in the days, going to the gym was not as popular in the era of 1950s, 1940s. I'm talking about the era of people like Marilyn Monroe and the others, and how these people, they didn't necessarily feel the need to go to the gym, or they didn't need to go to the gym, but their diets were great, right? Because there was emphasis on diets. Now in today's culture, where it's all about hustle and inflation is massive, inflation is such a big deal. People need to work more, people need to work extra hours, people need to work on the weekends, people need to work 2 jobs, and the fact that this is a thing makes it harder for the average person to sit down and meal prep and plan meals that actually suits their dietary needs. It is such a status thing. And so we know that only a certain type of people with certain type of status, a certain amount of money with certain net worths, can afford to have higher chefs and have the luxury of, eating the right foods and eating the freshest foods and having the right meal plans and all of that. We know that is a luxury for sure, especially for most people. Most people just tend to eat wherever they can. Also, being able to think about how you need to work out and what you need to do and how you need to make a plan to lose weight is such a big deal. Many people don't have that privilege because they have mortgage payments and they have kids to look after, and their health and fitness typically takes the back seat in cases like this. And we know that people with actual money and people with status are the ones that can actually afford to have personal trainers, are the ones that actually have the luxury of going to the gym 5 to 6 times a week. Because if you think about it, the more you adult, the more you make money, the more you get comfortable, you're exposed to more junk food and you just eat loads. And if you're really busy and you don't have the luxury of time, which is becoming more of a status symbol these days compared to just making loads of money and working loads of hours, if you have that time luxury to pop into the gym 5-6 times a week, or even 2 to 3 times a week, that is some sort of status. And so this is why being skinny has always been a classic time and time again. Back in the days, you could attribute this to what people in certain social classes could eat, the quality of their food, and like having chefs and having people to look after them and having people to like sort of meal prep for them, how this has made a difference for them compared to other people. And that's the way it was in the 90s, and that's why being skinny was a classic back then. But bringing it again to today's hustle culture, it's the fact that people do not even have the time to sit to cook. People do not have the time to go to the gym or do some form of exercise. People just don't have the time. And so if you're saying you have the time to go to the gym 5 to 6 times a week, we're like looking at you like, are you depending on bank of mom and dad? Do you have like, you know, a slush fund somewhere? Do you have a trust fund somewhere? Like, how are you getting this money if you have that much time? Or do you have the luxury of being able to pop into work? Maybe you live very close to work. You've obviously had choice in your career or in your living situation, despite like the cost of living. And so that's become more of a status symbol. And so we don't really know these things. When you meet a person, you can't really say, right? You can't really ask them everything to know exactly how their life has gone, etc. If they let you know that they're of a certain age, and you can look at them and objectively assess that, oh, this person is pretty skinny for their age, not even bringing age to it, but just generally, if someone just looks skinny, it's like, whoa, you've had more time than others in this, maybe even in your age group, or you've had more time than others generally to look this good or to pay attention to your diet and your health and your fitness, or you've just been blessed with good genetics, which is also like kind of a status symbol, but something that is bestowed on you, which is more, you know, towards the side of pretty privilege. Like, this is why being skinny is such a classic, because again, bringing things back to my first statement, as human beings, we would always crave and we will always try to achieve what's harder. We would always try to aim for, like, look at, you know, people in higher places and try to aim for that. We try to make more money so that we can like fit a certain image, certain aesthetic that's been, you know, taught to us that this is, you know, the pinnacle of success. And so the same thing applies to being skinny. It's like, okay, people in a certain social group look a certain way, and so like to fit into that is a big deal. To fit into that criteria is a big deal. And people in lower sort of echelons in society can then, like, you know, use this advantage to get into those social circles. And why it's not important for some people, it's important for other people, especially if their job involves lots of, like, you know, going to charities or going to events, or, you know, mixing a certain way, or having some sort of like leg up socially. Again, this is why the old money aesthetic that has been much a thing over the last 2 years involves being skinny. Most of the time you'd see that the old money aesthetic on Pinterest or whatever, it's always a skinny model or skinny person in the background. It could be, there are variations to skinny now. There's like skinny thick, there's skinny this, there's skinny that. In the end, it's typically a person that is skinny. Now that I spoke about the old money aesthetic, bringing the same to fashion trends now, because people in certain classes in society value being skinny, and naturally it's easy for them because they have these chefs and these personal trainers and they have time on their hands to look after themselves, and so they naturally stay skinny. Then it becomes a thing where they are policed to stay that way because, like, you know, everyone else in their group looks a certain way, and so it kind of proliferates where everybody around them, you know, has to fit in the same aesthetic. Because what do you mean? Do you mean you don't have a chef or you don't have a personal trainer and that's why you look that way? And so, you know, for this reason, all of them try to maintain the same aesthetic. Now, if everyone in a certain group that typically pumps money into the economy by their spending, not them, I know the middle class also pumps a lot of money into the economy, but, you know, these upper classes, they kind of like, in a way, still influence what very expensive brands would choose to produce. So like really high-end brands that maybe use only cashmere or certain textures of fabric for producing their stuff would typically want to produce stuff for people that can afford it, right? So if this higher up brands that have all the resources and all that to create this kind of like nice aesthetic looking clothes and with nice fabrics and all that, they create certain designs that only fits people of certain like shapes and sizes because those are the people they are catering to. So if they do that, now think about what smaller brands typically do, which is they imitate these brands that have like enough money to do all this, you know, designing, and they have a whole team behind each little detail and all that. So now what smaller brands typically do is they copy lots of their designs, and now this trickles down fashion wise as well. And another thing is like these big brands, a lot of them also, because they know that okay, they want this to fit on a certain type of model, because being skinny just makes clothes look better, because like people are not distracted by your body when you're looking at the clothes, and so they would use skinny models, right? So that kind of creates another, avenue for skinny privilege to even be more encouraged, especially in those higher classes, because they're the ones that will typically be at fashion weeks and all that, right? I know I'm talking about a lot of things, but in the end they're all intertwined. So now these big brands have to they do this because it's good for their brand, and they use this skinny models and all that, and it just makes sense that the same people they're marketing to, they're the same kind of people that tend to be skinny as well, like upper middle class or upper class people. They tend to be wanting to be skinny, or that's typically what they aim for, because it also makes them look younger, which is what you hear from people in these circles. This is pretty much how they think. This is generally their mindset in that circle. Now, like I was saying, these big brands makes this effect trickle down to smaller brands, and then we end up with clothes that fits more of a certain aesthetic or more of certain shapes. And that's why there's been a recent rise of, oh, this is for curvy people, this is for this people, this is for that people, more inclusivity when it comes to fashion. Because before now, brands only thought of serving people who would typically buy their products, people that would typically buy their products, and they've always catered to those people. And so yeah, this basically makes the trend sort of circle back every single time, because even if we deviate from it, brands again have to think, oh, these are the people that buy my stuff. And this mindset is actually passed in these groups from generation to generation, where you meet people from that old money backgrounds that still believe that women should only be of a certain size, because this is how they've been raised, this is how people in their inner circles think, this is how this is just it for them, this is all they've known all their lives. And so we always circle back to that, no matter how hard we deviate from that from time to time. And the reason for this is the fact that being feminine is always associated with being skinny, mostly in the circles. And you would actually hear people in the circles refer to some woman as pretty, and you look at her and you think, this is not actually what the definition of beautiful is. Generically, we know beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but in the end, what they're looking at with that woman is she is skinny, and so she is beautiful. And people in those circles tend to equate those together. They wouldn't pick someone that's maybe on the bigger side and pretty, conventionally beautiful, for someone that's actually skinny and isn't necessarily conventionally beautiful, but she's skinny, and so she is considered beautiful. And you see this sometimes in Hollywood, where there's some actresses that are very much glorified and all that, and when you look at them you think they're not conventionally beautiful, but maybe they're in their 40s and they have a certain size, and so people in those societies refer to them as beautiful, and so they're beautiful, right? So again, everyone is beautiful in their own way, but we know what society tends to think is conventionally beautiful, right? Now, I'm not talking about hair color or whatever, or eye color. I'm talking about facial features and what's typically appreciated. So now, again, coming back to the point of being feminine and being fragile is usually equated. So if you're on the bigger side, somehow you're not seen as being feminine. And I know this can be very misogynistic, but it is the way of the world. It is the way things are actually viewed. And the excuse that people in these circles would give for not equating someone that, or not looking at someone that is on the bigger side as being pretty, and many people that have been on the bigger side and have lost a bit of weight have ended up saying this as well, is that they can't see their bony structures. When they look at them, they can't see their bone structure at all, so it's hard for them to tell if they're actually naturally pretty, because if places are if they're extremely chubby in certain places, and certain places that feel loads of fat, then to them they can't tell if they're actually conventionally pretty. And this is what they would say. And people that have lost weight, you'd hear them also say that okay, I can see more of my face now that I've lost a bit of weight. I can see more of how I look. I don't know if that makes sense, or if you've heard people say this before, but I've heard people say it a lot, especially even here on YouTube, okay, now I can see more of what my body structure actually is now that all that fat is gone. And this is the excuse that people in those societies tend to give as well when they talk about how someone that is skinny, okay, they can say that person is beautiful, but for the reverse, they can't say the same. In the end, people would always try to get into certain circles because, for prestige, for their career advancement, just because, some of these things are purely aspirational as well, whether people are like, name rich but cash poor or whatever, which is a conversation for another day. But whether that's the case or not, people will try to get into certain circles, and so people would always circle back to losing weight and being skinny. And this is how skinny privilege is being preserved from generation to generation. Let me know what you think in the comment section. I'm not done talking about skinny privilege. I've been doing lots of research recently, and so if you want to follow me on this series, definitely subscribe to my channel, and so more people can see this video. Make sure you like, share, definitely give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you in my next video. Cheerio.